Good morning. I'm here at my homestay, which is called Le Fort Homestay. The wall that you see immediately behind the homestay's terrace is the wall of a fort. It's Hathroy Fort. There are about a dozen families who are said to be living there, and there's an old temple there, very representative of the history of Jaipur, and that Jaipur is such a city of forts. This morning, the plan is to go to Amer Fort, or the so-called Amber Fort. And as soon as I eat my breakfast of scrambled eggs and toast, along with a banana pancake, we'll be on our way.
Amer, or Amber, is a historic community a few kilometers outside Jaipur. Its fort/palace is a must-see for travelers.
You can call it a fortress because it is, but it's also a palace because it was the seat of the Rajput Maharajas from the time it was built in the late 1500s until the decision was made to move to another palace that was built in Jaipur in 1727. That would be City Palace today. A big part of that decision was to find a larger source of water, for the lake that you see at the front of this palace was its sole source of water. There are several ways to get up the hill to the fort. People can drive their cars up or rent a jeep, and a few still ride elephants up to the entrance. As you can see, there's probably not as many elephants as there used to be here when the practice became frowned on. In fact, not very many years ago, one animal rights organization determined that there were 87 elephants kept here and that many of them were malnutritioned. However, just so that you know, I walked up. I'm in the main entry of the fort, which you enter through the so-called Sun Gate, which faces east to the sunrise. This is the place where the Maharaja's returning armies would hold victory parades and show off the spoils of war, and where from the latticed windows above, the hidden away womenfolk of the royal court could gaze down on it all. It's also where the Maharajas could review their troops. This opulent palace is, of course, a classic example of Rajput architecture, which borrowed heavily from the Mughals. It's laid out on 4 levels, each with its own courtyards that serve different purposes, and each of those courtyards entered by magnificent gates.
One of the neat things about this palace is that so little of it is closed off to the public, including the interior chambers leading to the baths here on the 2nd level.
It gets fairly dark. You get to a section of the baths near external windows. Take a look at this.
Latticed windows and marble from ceiling to floor.
One of the amazing things to me personally is that although there are a lot of people on the premises, very few have found their way in here. I've entered the beautiful third courtyard, which was the private quarters of the Maharajas. And as you'll be able to see, there are two buildings here separated by a Mughal-style garden. Although the Rajputs and the Mughals guarded their own turf in northern India for centuries, it didn't prevent them from borrowing from each other's culture, including their architecture. The building to the left of the entry as you walk in, and it's behind me now, is the Sheesh Mahal, the Mirror Palace, which was added to the complex by one of the Rajas in the 16th century. It's called the Mirror Palace for the obvious reason of having many convex mirrors, and you can imagine how beautiful this must have been, illuminated by candles. One writer described it as a glittering jewel box. The second of the two buildings here, as you can see over my shoulder, is the Sukh Mahal, or House of Pleasure. It was a place for the king or the Raj to chill. Imagine what life must have been like living inside this place. It must have been extremely serene. You would have heard little, if anything, from outside this fortress, with its consecutive walls, and in the inner sanctum here, and with such a beautiful garden as this, one could relax and read and do whatever people in the royal families did during that era, but it would be a supremely peaceful place. Here in the fourth courtyard is the zenana, a Persian word that literally means of the women, which obviously tells you that this is the part of the palace where queens and concubines lived, or as the signpost here euphemistically referred to it, as the ladies' apartments. And I'm about to enter that harem right now. That murmuring sound that you hear are the sounds of doves. I'll try to show them to you. Well, I did try. Just entered a darkened space, and it's like an ante-room to one of these bedrooms. You could only wonder what the furnishings were like here, since everything is stripped, of course, and there's no effort or perhaps even ability to try to reconstruct that. But still, it's fascinating to let your imagination run wild in here. In a sense, this is like looking through a once elegant apartment that's become vacant. There are many living rooms inside the Queen's quarters and that's Queen's plural, by the way, all accessible by a common corridor, so that the Raja could enter at his choice, and in theory no one would know which queen he was visiting. Raja Man Singh took his obsession with discretion to the next level. He had 12 queens and built 12 stairwells connecting his private residence to each of the quarters. The rule was they couldn't come up. He would come down. I think I'm walking up one of those stairs now, and it's very steep. The steps, each one, are very steep. And all I can say is, the Raj must have been in good condition, or he would have killed himself going to and from his queens at night. Well, there was nothing slouchy about these rooms. They were indeed fit for a queen, I suppose. With terraces on the outside. Step out for a breath of fresh air. And one could always walk over to a window and, without leaving the confines of one's apartment, see this. Well, I sort of missed it to show it to you, but I'm standing at the one of the battlement stations of this fort. On the way out, the crenellated wall, and directly in front of my face careens a large monkey. This shadow passed in front of me at about 6 inches. And by the time I could respond and look to my right, there he was. Well, down below is, of course, the town of Amer, itself very old, with numerous Hindu and Jain temples and 3 mosques. It's a town these days heavily dependent on tourists who come here, and the attendant development has taken its toll. In fact, the World Monument Fund has listed the town among the 100 most threatened heritage sites in the world. Even this magnificent fort that I've just come from has suffered from modern neglect and negligence, starting in the 1970s. And more recently, if you can believe it, a movie crew did tremendous damage to parts of the palace, allowed to drill holes and even causing a roof of one of the palace buildings to collapse. It's a reminder that while tourists come and go without thinking much about it, the preservation of places like this can't be taken for granted.